Hello and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, your weekly dose of the top pro-life news and issues, all from a Catholic perspective. I'm your host, Catherine Hadro, in our Washington, D.C. studio. Thank you for joining us. Coming up on this week's show, we have an exclusive one-on-one sit-down with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to discuss his recent pro-life announcement. But first, House Republican leadership this week utilized a unique tactic to demand a vote on the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act, bypassing Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
25. 25's the number of times we have asked on the floor in the chamber to save children who are born alive and survive an abortion. 25 times is the number that we've heard no from the Democrats.
Today, we will finally start the process of bringing this vote to the floor, to the U.S. House of Representatives, the People's House. This is a measure that has passed with bipartisan support in the past. This is about giving life-saving care.
Nancy Pelosi refuses to bring this bill up. But you know what? The good news is all of us here today have a message for Nancy Pelosi. If you won't bring it up, we'll bring it up. And that's what this discharge petition is about.
House Minority Whip Steve Scalise filed a discharge petition on the Born Alive bill following a Capitol Hill press conference this week. A discharge petition allows a simple majority of the House to force a floor vote on a bill, bypassing Speaker Nancy Pelosi and House Democrats who have blocked a vote on the Born Alive bill more than 25 times now. Every Republican House member and 21 Democrats must sign the discharge petition for it to be successful. Pro-Life Caucus Chair Chris Smith tells us why his Democratic colleagues should support the bill.
So this is very pro-child, pro-woman, human rights legislation that needs to be enacted. So we reach across and say, read the bill, look at the facts, which are alarming and I think heartbreaking.
The Born Alive bill would require medical professionals provide a newborn who survives a botched abortion appropriate medical care. Abortion survivor Claire Colwell was one of 3 abortion survivors present at the Born Alive press conference. She tells us her message to lawmakers considering the bill.
I mean, I would ask them, what about me and what about my humanity is less deserving of medical care and of life than someone like you, someone like them?
After the press conference, House Minority Whip Steve Scalise led a group of pro-life lawmakers to the House floor to file and sign the discharge petition. The chair of the U.S. Bishops' Pro-Life Committee, Archbishop Joseph Naumann, responded, saying in part, "Our nation is better than infanticide. Babies born alive during the process of abortion deserve the same care and medical assistance as any other newborn." Joining us now is the man leading the charge on the discharge petition, House Minority Whip Steve Scalise of Louisiana. Congressman, thank you for your time.
Catherine, good to be with you.
First off, can you walk us through how a discharge petition works and the strategy you're using to get a vote on the Born Alive bill?
Sure. In the case of a bill like this, the Born Alive Act, where Nancy Pelosi refuses to allow this bill to come up for a floor vote, there is a procedure called the discharge petition. And what it does is gives you an ability to file this resolution, which I've now done, and then you start collecting signatures from other members of Congress. And if 218 members of Congress sign the discharge petition, then that bill automatically comes up for a vote, bypassing Nancy Pelosi in this case, and bringing the bill up even though the leadership doesn't want it to come up.
To critics who say this bill still doesn't have a chance of passing and this effort is simply an attempt to rally the base, what is your response?
My response is, right now in many states across the country, it's legal to kill a baby when it's born alive outside the womb. The fact that we need an act of Congress to stop that from happening shocks a lot of people, including myself, who would think, how is that even legal? And yet you've seen in states like New York, they allow this to happen. Unfortunately, so many Democrats here in Washington are so out of touch with people around the country that they want to defend that practice. They want to allow babies to still be killed. And shame on anybody who doesn't stand up for the lives of babies born alive outside the womb, who's willing to let those babies be murdered. It's not even abortion anymore. It's actual murder outside the womb of a baby that is alive, that survived maybe an abortion attempt. And so this is why it's so important that we battle. You know, you come up here not to do the easy things, but to do the hard things. Frankly, this should be easy. This should be something every member of Congress supports, the Born Alive Act. But unfortunately, Pelosi's made it very partisan. And if that's the case, then it's even more important that we fight for those innocent lives. And people all across the country, I think, are outraged when they are finding out now that this is legal in America, and it shouldn't be.
This discharge petition comes after House Democrats have blocked a floor vote on the Born Alive bill more than 20 times. What do you make of the Democrats' refusal to vote on this bill?
I think they're making a huge mistake. I think it shows that Nancy Pelosi is incredibly out of touch with the country. And look, this issue transcends politics. It transcends the abortion debate. Republicans and Democrats alike, in polling that you've seen, overwhelmingly support the Born Alive Act and think it's immoral to allow the baby to be murdered once it's born alive outside the womb. In fact, even a majority of pro-choice Americans think that this is not part of abortion and that those babies should be protected. So if Nancy Pelosi wants to keep blocking this bill, we've got this one tool, the discharge petition, to go around her. And frankly, to bring it straight to the American people, because we're already over 150 signatures. And as we get closer to 218, people are going to be looking at this list and going, wait a minute, why isn't my member of Congress on the list? And I think they're going to be hearing from their constituents. And I would encourage anybody, take a look, go to republicanwhip.gov and see if your member of Congress is not on that list for the discharge petition for the Born Alive Act. Call them, pick up the phone and call and tell them you want to see them on that discharge petition. You want to see them stand up for the lives of babies who are born alive outside the womb.
To that point, do you have any message specifically for your Democratic colleagues considering this petition? You need 21 Democrats to sign the discharge petition.
I do, and there's at least 21 members on the Democrat side who have said they're pro-life. And if you claim to be pro-life, you can't go back home and say you're pro-life if you don't sign this discharge petition. It's that simple. All of the major groups that support life around the country are staking this as a rallying cry and saying, here's an opportunity for people to stand up for the most innocent and vulnerable among us. And if you're not willing to sign this discharge petition to say that if a baby is born alive outside the womb, that baby can't be murdered. That should be the easiest thing you do as a member of Congress. And yet, for whatever reason, Nancy Pelosi's trying to politicize it. I think she's on the wrong side, but that doesn't mean any other Democrat needs to stand with Pelosi. Stand with those babies that are born alive and stand with the vast majority of Americans, Republican and Democrat alike, that share our views that babies should be protected when they're born alive.
At the press conference announcing this discharge petition, you were joined by 3 abortion survivors. How important are their witnesses to this conversation?
Wow, how incredibly moving it was earlier this week to see those testimonials. And I applaud the survivors of abortion who have come forward, those that were there at our press conference, and all around the country, because I think it's a side of the abortion debate that so many people don't see, that there are people that survive an abortion. What a powerful testimony to life and how much they value life. And so I think having them there just added so much to this debate and put a human face on this issue. This is happening. It's happening in America. Some people can't believe it's legal. Some people aren't sure it's happening. So to see people who survived an abortion attempt, who are alive and love life and celebrate life and want to stand up for others who might be like them so that they can have life as well.
And finally, Congressman, when the Senate voted on the Born Alive bill earlier this year, 10 senators who identify as Catholic voted against this ban on infanticide. As a Catholic yourself, how does your faith shape your view on this specific pro-life bill?
Well, my Catholic faith is strongly tied to who I am. I mean, these are our values, and you ought to fight for the values that you believe in. And frankly, I think these are the same Judeo-Christian values that our country was founded upon. One nation under God, and that our rights were given to us not through lawmakers, but through God. And look, the first of all the values that we have, and every American should have the ability to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. and the first of those is life. So it's part of who I am, and hopefully others can look inside themselves and see that same set of values that they should be able to represent here as members of Congress.
House Minority Whip Steve Scalise, thank you for your leadership and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And joining us now in studio for continued analysis is Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List. Marjorie, what a week. Thanks for being here.
Wow. Yes.
So for this discharge petition to be successful, every Republican member needs to sign on and 21 Democrats.
That's right.
Are there specific Democrat lawmakers you have your eye on for this?
Yeah, we do. They're two separate sets. One are a handful of pro-life Democrats that we generally can rely on. They are ones that you may know. Dan Lipinski, I believe, has been on the show. Colin Peterson from Minnesota, Matt Cartwright from Pennsylvania, James Langevin from Rhode Island, and Henry Cuellar from Texas. Also, one that signed it was Ben McAdams from Utah, and he represents another group that we're focused on, and that is a group of congressmen that defeated pro-life incumbents last time. They live in big Trump districts, meaning Trump won big time in those districts, and they have to be watching what their votes are looking like in order to stay in the good graces of their districts. So those are the two groups that we're looking at.
How frequently is a discharge petition utilized to advance important pro-life legislation?
I mean, almost never. Obviously, we held the House, so we didn't need that. It's really only used when the heavy hand of the majority has got its finger on the vote, keeping it down. There's no way that this speaker is going to voluntarily bring up this bill. She knows how badly it puts Democrats in the light in which it puts them. So a discharge petition is a really great tool, being in the minority. It is an organizational center. It encourages education. It's a lobbying point, and every once in a while it actually works. And these are the types of moments where it actually can, that the majority is overcome by the very vehement minority.
Can you remind our viewers why efforts like this are important, even if this bill does not pass the House? This isn't meaningless, right?
No, it's a really big deal. It's in direct line with what the president has been doing in bringing this issue up in the State of the Union message. Whenever he goes to a rally, he talks about this issue to rallies. It was his biggest applause line in El Paso when he was there. Keeping it in the uppermost mind of Americans is really important right now. It's a great education point about the fact that it actually exists. Before New York, frankly, where it passed, where this that radical up until birth bill passed, most Americans, frankly, were not focused, didn't even know that it was legal up until birth. Now you've got 70% of Democrats saying that they are for the Born Alive protection bill. Incredible. So this is a real sea change, and the more this petition effort continues, the more it keeps it top of mind in the minds of Americans right now.
Speaking of which, there's more than a year and a half between now and the 2020 presidential election. Do you think the Born Alive bill will remain a key issue? I
do think so, because it's like many issues that have really gotten to be top level, there's a tennis ball effect from it's a big deal on the federal level, and that encourages a lot of state activity, and it goes back to the state level. So it's going back and forth on the state level, on the federal level, staying high in the mind of the national conversation. Every single time a state like New York and Vermont and Rhode Island and Illinois pass a abortion up until birth bill, this comes up again. The left is keeping this high in the mind of the nation, and then pro-lifers are keeping it high in the mind by trying to pass bills to prevent such late-term bills from passing.
So important. And finally, Marjorie, while we have you, we are about to share our one-on-one interview with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to our viewers. Can you speak to his pro-life leadership within the State Department?
I can. He and I have been friends since he was in the House. I remember trying to convince him to run for the U.S. Senate when he was thinking of, maybe doing that, when he was thinking of maybe the Kansas Senate, but no, obviously God had different plans for him. He is a very, very strong Christian. He doesn't necessarily communicate that as the State Department, head of the State Department, but it is there. He's always there. He's always got a prayer for the moment, and what he's done by keeping our tax dollars out of the exportation of abortion in any kind of program all across the country, and making sure that he's put stops against people trying to get around those rules has been beautiful. And then also enforcing finally the cisgender amendment, which most people didn't even know existed. It just means you can't lobby foreign nations undermining their sovereign laws on abortion. If you were in an embassy, you cannot invite all the pro-abortionists over to it for a big party to try to lobby the legislature to undermine Chile's pro-life laws, for instance. So he is really a hero. I'm a huge fan of his.
So important. Thank you so much for all of that insight. Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List.
Thank you.
House Minority Whip Steve Scalise filed a discharge petition for the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act this week. This tactic would force a floor vote on the bill after House Democrats have blocked it more than 25 times. But in order for the discharge petition to be successful, a simple majority, or 218 members of Congress, need to sign it. That brings us to this week's call to action. Go to ProLifeWeekly.com. Again, that is ProLifeWeekly.com. Here you can send a message directly to your U.S. representative, urging your member to sign this discharge petition for the Born Alive bill, so we can see a vote on the House floor. The Born Alive bill simply requires abortion survivors, infants who are born alive, receive necessary medical care. In order to get 218 House member signatures on this discharge petition, 21 Democrats will need to join every Republican member. This should be a bipartisan issue, and it's vital the U.S. House votes on this so that, first off, we have a chance to protect abortion survivors, and secondly, so we can get each and every member of Congress on the record when it comes to infanticide. When you go to the website, ProLifeWeekly.com, you'll simply fill out some of your basic information so we can craft this message to be for your specific U.S. representative. Let us raise our pro-life voice and urge our representatives to sign the discharge petition so we can get a vote on the Born Alive bill. Go to ProLifeWeekly.com. Turning now to our next story, we have an exclusive one-on-one interview with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Secretary Pompeo last week announced the Trump administration is taking action to further strengthen and implement a global pro-life policy. Secretary Pompeo and I discussed this and more at the State Department. Here is our exclusive EWTN Pro-Life Weekly interview. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, thanks for being with us this morning.
It's great to be with you.
You made a big announcement last week about more strictly enforcing the expanded Mexico City policy. Can you tell us, why is this policy important and why now?
So, Catherine, President Trump has made clear that protecting the life of the unborn is an important part of what this administration is working to do. One of the places that there's risk is that American taxpayer dollars, money that comes from you and from me, will be used by foreign non-governmental organizations in a way that supports abortion or abortion-related services. We want to do everything we can to make sure that that does not happen. And so what we announced was a way to prevent there being backdoor from loopholes, from subcontracting in a way that would present the risk that there would be one more child that didn't come to life.
And the second part of your announcement concerned fully enforcing the cisgender amendment, which prohibits U.S. funds from being used to lobby for or against abortion. Can you clarify, is this the first time this law is being fully enforced? And where have you seen abuses of this law?
So this is a substantial step. We want to make sure that in everything we do, in the way we contract, in the way we communicate, every organization to which United States taxpayers provide funds understands their obligation, their duty to ensure that there's not the promotion of abortion anywhere in the world. And the cisgender amendment has been on the books for a long time. This administration is determined to ensure that it is fully enforced.
And how are you planning to fully enforce the cisgender amendment abroad?
So there'll be lots of ways. First, it's to communicate. Just as with any enforcement mechanism, when organizations understand their obligations, most of them will comply. They'll want to do so selfishly because they want to continue to receive those resources, but they want to do things right, so we have to communicate the requirements that they have. The second thing is where we find an organization that's not behaving appropriately, acting in a way that is inconsistent with what they've committed to, that is, they'll have a contractual obligation, we'll pull that money.
Planned Parenthood has called the Global Protect Life policy the global gag rule. Can you clarify, Mr. Secretary, does this pro-life policy censor doctors abroad, as abortion advocates claim?
Not at all. We know the First Amendment here in the United States. We're doing nothing to deny anyone the ability to speak about a subject that they deem important, indeed, even if they disagree with this administration's views. What we're simply saying is that the American policy is going to push back. We're going to do our level best to ensure that the least amongst us, the unborn, aren't, with U.S. taxpayer dollars, aborted.
And what role does the State Department play in upholding a pro-life agenda abroad and upholding the sanctity of life?
So the Mexico City policy that was originally put in place by President Reagan, now several decades back, President Trump has expanded upon. And the State Department has a real role in that. You see that in the announcement that we made. Our team around the world, the resources that Congress provides, that with monies that come from the American taxpayers, we have an obligation to ensure that it's spent in a way that is consistent with President Trump's objectives.
We are more than halfway through President Donald Trump's first term. You've been Secretary of State for less than a year, almost 1 year. How much time has had to be spent simply undoing 8 years' worth of abortion extremism put into place from the Obama administration?
So we did flip the switch. There's no doubt. President Trump's policies are very different than the previous administration. Some of that work here at the State Department was done before my time, when the administration first came into office under the guidance of the Vice President and the President. But there's still more work to do. I've spent a fair amount of time on it. I'll continue to ensure that we're executing President Trump's vision with respect to making sure that no money that comes through the State Department is used to underwrite abortion or abortion-related services.
What has President Trump said to you about upholding life abroad?
Yeah, he's made it clear. That's the mission.
When we come back, we will continue our conversation with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm your host, Catherine Hadro. Despite media bias and straight-up silence, the pro-life movie Unplanned exceeded expectations at the weekend box office. That's this week's Speak Out segment.
Abby Johnson is in the other room.
Here.
Unplanned tells the true story of Abby Johnson's conversion from Planned Parenthood clinic director to pro-life leader. Prior to its release this past weekend, the film faced an uphill battle. The MPAA gave it an R rating. Many major TV networks refused to sell ads for the film. And on Saturday, the movie's Twitter account was temporarily suspended. The film also received a slew of negative reviews. Variety magazine called it effective propaganda. Guardian's review referred to Unplanned as a dim-witted Christian drama. But none of this could stop the audience from showing up. Unplanned landed at the #5 spot at the box office. It earned $6 million, double its projections. It received a rare A+ cinema score. And the film did so well, Unplanned's distributor says it plans to add an additional 600 screens. The Unplanned success extends beyond just the box office. Get this. At the end of the film, moviegoers are directed to a phone number. They can text HOPE to 73075 for resources, including resources for women and families facing unplanned pregnancies. One of those resources, Heartbeat International, a network of pregnancy centers, tells EWTN Pro-Life Weekly that during Unplanned's opening weekend, its abortion pill rescue network saw a 30% increase in calls. That means Unplanned's viewer impact isn't confined to the 106 minutes on the big screen. It's impacting people afterwards, too. And despite the media pushback, that's the best possible review there is. Remember, there is something you can do, too, to build up a culture of life. Follow this week's call to action. Go to prolifeweekly.com. Send a message directly to your U.S. representative, urging your member to sign the Discharge Petition for the Born Alive bill so we can see a vote on the House floor. Finally, we want to share the final part of our interview with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, which reveals his more personal pro-life side. That's this week's Pro-Life Focus.
You graduated, Mr. Secretary, first in your class at West Point Military Academy. You graduated from Harvard Law School. Yet many people paint the pro-life movement as anti-intellectual, as an issue solely of faith separated from reason. What's your response to that?
Science is on the side of life. We've seen it. I think anyone who understands that this precious young child is being killed recognizes that the science, reason, dictate that this life must be protected. I sometimes hear those on the other side say that we're anti-science. Nothing with respect to protecting the unborn could be more untrue. Common sense is with us too.
Just days ago, the New York Times said no Secretary of State in recent decades has been as open and fervent as Mr. Pompeo about discussing Christianity and foreign policy in the same breath. Mr. Secretary, how much does your Christian faith shape your day-to-day work here in the State Department, particularly on the issue of life?
So, as a Christian, it impacts the way I think about the world. There's no doubt about that. The policies I follow are directed by President Trump. The mission that we have is bounded by our Constitution. But it's certainly my faith, I think, with all believers, believers of every faith, Christianity, Judaism, Islam. I think it impacts all of the way we look. I talk about it because I want people to know where I'm coming from, how I think about ensuring that whether it's protecting the unborn or making sure that there are First Amendment protections or treating every human being, regardless of their race, regardless of their gender, treating every human being with the dignity they deserve by the mere fact that they're a human being. That is a fundamental Christian belief and something that I think does in fact inform the way I stare at the world.
Absolutely. Thank you for your leadership, Secretary of
Thank
State
you
Mike
very
Pompeo.
much.
Thank you.
Great to be with you, Catherine.
Thank you to the Secretary for taking time to sit down with us this week. That does it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. Until next week, I'd love to hear from you. You can email us at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com or look for us all over social media. Just search for EWTN Pro-Life. Remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.